Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Michelle Kuei, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story. And our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about these amazing books you're writing, the speaking that you're doing, the coaching that you're doing, which I think is remarkable, and also your podcast.
Absolutely. So to start off, I was born in Taiwan. I was born in a town a little south of Taipei. It's a place called Hsinchu. So it's a very small, tiny, suburby area where it's not as busy as Taipei. I think most of our listener might be more familiar with Taipei because it's such a big city in Taiwan, and there's a lot of things that's going on in Taiwan that whether it's political or the food that you enjoy, we have a lot of night market. So most people are familiar with Taipei, but not Hsinchu. Hsinchu is known for these really we call it rice noodle. And so it's a place where you go and you enjoy yourself with like a nice cup of soup during the winter time, and it's made of these rice noodles. So that's where I was born, and I was born in a very small tiny village. My dad was in the military, and he taught high school students military curriculum. And so in Taiwan, all the boys would have to go through the training once they reach to the junior high school year or high school year. They go through all these military training. In the past, it was mandatory, and so my dad used to teach in the high school, and so we had the privilege of living in a military village, veterans village. And I remember the place I was born. When my parents described it to me, I have very little image of what my place, the place that was born, but based on what they're telling me, that it's about the size of a American garage, so very tiny, very small. And we were living with my uncle, with my grandparents, so three big family living together on the same lot. And our space was about the size of an American garage. And that's the place I was born. I'm the middle child. You might be able to tell later that I'm the middle child because I go through some weird phases in my family. So that's where I was born.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Taoyuan. So my family actually moved. We needed to have a bigger house when my sister was born. So there's three of us in the family. And so when she was born, we ended up moving to Taoyuan, which is a little south of Hsinchu, so even further. And we moved. I was there for about 15 years before my family actually came to America. Prior to that, there's a lot of things that we can talk about because my life pretty much went from places to places, and I live in different areas in Taiwan before I came to America, and even in America, I live in different parts. So when I'll go back a little bit in terms of in Taiwan, something happened. There was a story that I often tell and share, is that a lot of listeners, they might not be able to watch or see me. I'm sitting down right now. So just to give everybody a sense of what I look like, I'm 4 feet 4 inches tall. I'm the same height as I'm standing, and I walk with two crutches, and my left leg is crooked. I cannot walk without assistance. And this is because of a car accident that had happened in Taiwan when I was 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So how the accident happened was actually I was coming home from school one day, crossing
Mhm.
the street, and my I was waiting for my mom to pick me up from the school.
Right.
As I was crossing the street, it was a very busy street. We didn't have any traffic light, and as I was crossing, I started to hear a lot of these noise, commodity that was around me. But by the time I actually paused and realized I found myself in the middle of the street, and
Mm.
there was a taxi that came really fast towards me, which hit me and pushed me 100 feet away.
Jeez.
I lost consciousness.
Yeah.
By the time I woke up, I was already in the hospital. I saw my parents talking to the doctor, and I realized when I looked down, my waist all the way to my ankle, it was wrapped with casts. The
Mm.
doctor had put me in a cast so
Wow.
that they can stabilize me. And that happened when I was 11-year old.
Wow. How long were you in that cast?
I was in that cast for about 3 months.
Wow.
After they took it off, they realized the bone wasn't growing, wasn't healing. I ended up going back to surgery multiple times,
Mm.
and I counted there's about 13 scars on both of my legs.
Oh, wow. Wow. So they went to work trying to put you back together.
Yes, I was broken in pieces.
Mm.
And so the journey from 11 to 15 years old, that good 4 years of my life, I actually spent a lot of my time in Taipei
Yeah.
at a recovery rehab center where it used to be, they used to serve all the military family, anyone who's in the service. And I was there back and forth in and out of surgery for the 4 years. And
Mm.
I also did the recovery, going through physical therapists. It was all done in the rehab center. The unique thing about that rehab center is that it served children from anywhere from 2 years old all the way to when they're reaching the 21 years old. So
Mhm.
it covers a lot range of pediatric patient. The thing about that place is that parents are not they are not allowed to stay over. So it was more like a boarding school type of things,
Wow.
except it's for a rehab center.
Right.
And so I spent the 4 years living in the rehab center by myself, like a boarding school. My
Mhm.
parents would come and visit me on the weekend, but majority of the time I was there doing things on my own and with the care of all these healthcare professions, nurses, doctors, and physical therapists. I started to make friends, and there's a lot of my peer who struggled with during that period of time. It was a post the polio pandemic,
Mhm.
and so a lot of kids had polio, and oftentimes I don't like to be judged by people because I was walking with crutches back then.
Mhm.
And so what really triggers a lot of this negative self-talk later on had to do with my own identity.
Yeah.
Because during that time, I sort of people start sort of identifying me as someone who has disability.
Mhm.
But that disability wasn't something that I was born with. It was
Mhm.
something that had happened to me, but that's not who I am.
Right.
So I struggle with that self-identity very early on in my teenage year. I had
Mhm.
no idea of who I was, who I am, because of the lack of that identity of a sense of belonging in that community, in a place where I truly recognize for my own strength.
Right.
Yeah.
So so in that 4 years that you were in rehab and surgeries and right, and in that
Mhm.
in that facility,
Yeah.
what was the single most important lesson you learned from that?
I think the single most important lesson that I have learned is how resilient you can be
Mhm.
when something happened to you, right? For me, it was an accident that causes my disability.
Mhm.
But when I look around, there's so many others. They were born with some pre-existing conditions
Mhm.
that they had no choice but to accept. And it's amazing how the human capacity is to adapt
Mm.
to our situation. And
Mhm.
I think it's a very important part of resilience. A lot of people talk about resilience is your ability to bounce back. But before
Mhm.
you even bounce back, there's something else that needs to happen in order for you to actually bounce back. And
Right.
that has a lot to do with being able to accept the reality of
Mhm.
the fact that there are certain things that we cannot change, but
Right.
what are you going to do about that situation where you cannot change?
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
And so when people starting to develop that resilience, it's not because they're able to bounce back, it's because they're fully accepting their situation, their circumstances, but they actually adapt their daily habit, their routine, the way that we do things, the how we handle, how we reach up to the shelf when you're only 4 feet 4 inches tall,
Mhm.
right? So there's a lot of things that we start to learn and adapt, and that becomes the skills that you need in
Right.
order to bounce back to be resilient.
Mhm.
So
No,
that
I
was
totally agree with that.
part that was a very important part of the lesson that I had learned. And I didn't learn it from myself from within. That didn't happen till much later, right? I
Mhm.
learned it from just observing how others survive and adapt. And what is it about them that allow them to continue this journey to live the life that they want to live?
So these are others that were in the hospital with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
These are
So
my
they were
peer.
examples.
They were great examples, and I think nowadays we call them our guide, our
Mhm.
mentor, right? I think there's a lot of people that we meet at that moment. We may not know the reason why we met them,
Yeah.
but retrospective, I think a lot of the lessons that I have learned about how to adapt, how to
Mhm.
live, how to survive has a lot to do with that 4 years of time where I was able to observe and how they handle tough situations.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's possible that you actually went through this process so that you could someday help others going through these types of situations or challenges in their lives?
Absolutely. I really think that we all go through these moments that we have no explanation in that moment. Why are we going through this?
Mhm.
But there's a purpose behind, there's a great design
Mhm.
behind why we experience things that we experience. There's a reason behind why we experiencing difficulty or challenges or obstacles. There are lessons that we need to learn. And one of my theory is that if we don't learn it this time, it's gonna somehow come around again.
Isn't that
It's
the
gonna
truth? Yeah.
come
Isn't that
around
the
again
truth?
until you learned it. So,
Yeah.
if you actually take your time to learn the lesson
Mhm.
now, right, it's going to serve you a lot better in the future. And I know it's hard. It's sometimes depending on what situation you're in, it can be really, really tough and really hard, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's having that realization that there's always hope, no matter
Mhm.
how small or how insignificant it looks right now to you, there's always hope. And if I just stick it out a little
Mhm.
more, right? Stick around just for a little longer, I might be able to see the meaning behind it. And
Yeah.
sometimes it might not happen in this lifetime.
Yeah.
I happen to believe this whole karma of things that will come around, what goes around will come around. And
Mhm.
I do believe that what we're experiencing is going to come around if you don't learn
Yeah.
it now. So you
Yeah.
might
No,
as
I
well just
totally agree. And there was a very wise man that once said that those who ignore history
yeah,
tend to repeat it, right? If you
yeah,
don't learn the lessons of history, you're coming back to it, right? And it's
yeah,
one of those things where I there's incredible wisdom that comes from going through trials and tribulations and things, right? And a lot of times that wisdom is something you can pass on to others that are going through something similar, right? Or have gone
yeah,
through something similar. And now they're trying to find themselves, trying to get back on their feet. They're trying to put their life back together. They're trying to, you know what I mean? That's
yeah,
exactly why we do this podcast the way we do it, because we want people's life stories, because we want to be able to share with our listeners what you've learned, right?
mhm,
And how you've made it through. Because there are people, I guarantee you, that are listening to this podcast. We're in 58 countries now.
mhm,
right? That's one third of the or 30% of the world, almost a third of the world. There are people that are listening to this podcast that are going through things, right? They might be going through a divorce. They might be, they might have lost their job. They might be, in any number of challenges. And what happens is when you come along and you can share with them that, look, I was in this for 4 years, how many surgeries, right? 13, 14 surgery, and all of a sudden, right? And you were able to put your life back together and thrive from it, right? And not only do that, now you're an international public speaker, you're motivating people, you're writing books, you've got a podcast, you're coaching. I mean, look at all this, right? That's a big, big part of sharing with people and showing them through our stories how you can get to where you want to be. And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's just like you said, watching somebody or watching different people around you, like you, as an example, and then following, and deciding, what, if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Yes. And
And
I
I
do
just
believe,
absolutely love the fact that you are taking that wisdom and sharing it with the world.
yeah.
It's a big deal.
I think what also worked for me was for a very long time, I was asking the wrong question.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of time we're all in our head asking questions. Why does it happen to me? Why is it this way? Why is it only me happening to this? And why am I going through the divorce? Why did I get laid off?
Yeah.
There's a lot of asking question, but I don't believe that we asked the right question. And that was me for a very, very long time. I was asking the wrong question. I was asking, why does this happen to me?
Mhm.
Why am I the only one in this family being this way? Why,
Mhm.
why do I have to go through this? But I forgot to ask the most important question, which is, what do I need to learn from this?
Yeah. Yeah. How is this preparing me for the future, right? What is it that I can glean from this that I can then go out and share with the world? That's what I'm saying. That approach that you eventually got to, that's exactly what absolutely makes the world turn, right? And
Yeah.
it helps people everywhere. I mean, you're literally on this podcast doing this interview and people are listening to this and you're helping people you'll never meet,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big, big deal. So the way you live your life, I think, is incredibly admirable, and I wanted to acknowledge you for it. I really am super, super proud of you.
Thank
So,
you.
growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Taiwan?
My favorite thing about growing up in Taiwan is freedom.
Yeah,
Especially as a kid, I think there's a lot of freedom in doing the things I wanted to do.
right.
Especially, I think it's also true no matter where you are. Back in the 80s, 70s, we was still safe
Yeah,
to go out there and not having to lock your door per
yeah,
se. Right.
yeah.
So I remember growing up, I was running through the rice fields in
Mhm,
Taiwan. I was being chased by the farmers with their big things, the plowing tool, because
mhm,
we were digging up holes in the ground in the rice field to make hot potato or
mhm,
hot sweet potato. And those were like childhood memory that you cannot erase or replace, or nothing that even come close to it
yeah,
nowadays, right? Those are such precious moments that you just remember for a lifetime.
yeah,
But I think a lot of it has to do with the freedom to being and express who I am.
mhm,
And I think being able to have that expression, that self-expression, even within my own family, where I can share if I'm sad, I start to cry. If I'm happy, I start to laugh. And my family really gave me that space of
mhm,
that's okay if you need to cry. I'm gonna make fun of you, but it's okay to cry. My-
mhm,
I am the weird child who, well, very very sensitive child when I was growing up. And little things would trigger my emotion. I would start to cry. But my parents, they were so open to allow me and gave me that space to express myself, which really cultivated this version of Michelle who's
mhm,
able to articulate, express herself because the environment that I was growing up.
yeah,
And not many people have that privilege of growing up in such environment, right? A lot of us, our emotion are being suppressed. A lot of us are going through struggles where we
mhm,
cannot cry or laugh at certain situation. And so that emotional outlet is such an important strength for me to be able to tell my stories in the way that, hey, I totally get it. And that empathy allows me to, it's almost my superpower
Mhm.
in a way. It allowed me to connect with people better. It allowed me to express what they're feeling, and also express how my experience might be relatable for them. So a lot of that self-expression allowed me, and the freedom of just being who I am allowed me to become this version of who I am today.
That's awesome. I love that. That is really cool. Growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I would say my mom. So
Mm,
my mom, she's a very strong woman, and a lot of what I do nowadays really model after her.
mhm.
She's strong, she's resilient.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.